Imagine being stranded in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. No food, no fresh water, and no way to call for help. You're completely alone, drifting across thousands of miles of open sea, with nothing but endless waves and silence around you. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and somehow, you're still alive. This isn't a movie. It's the real-life survival story of Salvador Alvarenga, a man who defied all logic and science by surviving 438 days lost at sea. What he went through is almost impossible to believe, and yet it really happened. But how did he make it? And what shocking truth did he reveal after he was finally rescued? This is a story of unbelievable endurance, sheer luck, and the terrifying reality of the open ocean. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it takes to survive the impossible. Salvador Alvarenga was an experienced fisherman, used to the dangers of the open ocean. He had spent years working on boats, battling rough waves, and hauling in massive catches. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. On November the 17th, 2012, Alvarenga set out from the coast of Mexico with a young deckhand named Ezequiel Cordoba. Their plan was simple: head out in a small fiberglass fishing boat, catch some sharks and tuna, and return in less than a day. It was a routine trip, something Alvarenga had done countless times before. But this time, something went horribly wrong. A sudden and violent storm rolled in, bringing massive waves and fierce winds. Within hours, their boat was completely off course, pushed far away from the coast. Their radio was dead, their engine had failed, and they had no way to signal for help. At first, they assumed someone would come looking for them. The company Alvarenga worked for knew he was out there. Rescue teams would be searching. But as the hours passed, then days, then weeks, it became painfully clear. Nobody was coming. Lost in the endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean, Alvarenga and Cordoba were now completely on their own. No land in sight, no food, no water, only the vast, merciless sea stretching in every direction. And this was just the beginning of their nightmare. Days turned into weeks, and their situation became more desperate with each passing hour. With no supplies, Alvarenga and Cordoba were forced to rely on whatever the ocean provided. At first, they managed to catch fish using their bare hands. They ate them raw, their bodies rejecting the uncooked flesh at first, but hunger left them no choice. When the fish weren't biting, they turned to birds, grabbing them out of the air and drinking their blood to stay hydrated. Rainwater became their only source of fresh water, and when the skies stayed clear for days, they had no choice but to drink their own urine. But hunger and thirst weren't their only enemies. The sun was relentless, burning their skin during the day. At night, the temperature dropped and they shivered under the open sky. Sharks circled their boat, drawn by the scent of blood from the fish they caught. Each day blurred into the next, a never-ending fight to stay alive. Then, after weeks of suffering, something terrible happened. Cordoba, the younger fisherman, became sick. His body was rejecting the raw fish, the salt water, the extreme hunger. His strength faded. Alvarenga begged him to eat, to keep going, but Cordoba refused. He lay in the boat, silent, barely moving. And then, one morning, he was gone. Alvarenga was now completely alone. No food, no water, no hope. Just the endless ocean, stretching in every direction. And somehow, he still had 416 days left to survive. Alvarenga was now completely alone, drifting in an endless blue prison with no sense of time. The loneliness was suffocating. He had no one to talk to, no idea how long he had been out there, and no guarantee he would ever see land again. To keep himself from losing his mind, he started talking to Cordoba, imagining his friend was still there. He had full conversations with him, asking him questions, telling him stories, even arguing with him. Deep down, Alvarenga knew Cordoba was gone, but keeping him alive in his mind was the only thing stopping him from falling into total despair. His survival instincts kicked in like never before. He learned how to track bird flight patterns to find fish. He let barnacles grow on the boat because they attracted smaller fish, which in turn attracted bigger fish he could catch. He even figured out how to catch jellyfish, swallowing them whole despite the burning sensation in his throat. Days turned into months. His hair and beard grew wild. His clothes rotted away, leaving him exposed to the brutal sun. His body shrank as starvation ate away at his muscles. But somehow, his mind stayed sharp. At one point, he spotted a large cargo ship in the distance. He waved his arms, screamed with everything he had left, but the ship didn't stop. It sailed past, completely unaware that a man who had already been missing for over a year was right there, begging for his life. Alvarenga was on the edge of death, but he refused to let go. He had survived longer than anyone thought possible. The question now was, would he ever be found? After more than a year lost at sea, Alvarenga had given up hope. His body was weak, his mind was slipping, and he had accepted that he would die alone in the vast Pacific. But then, out of nowhere, he saw something he hadn't seen in 438 days. Land. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. He had hallucinated land before, only to watch it fade away like a cruel mirage. But this time, it was real, a faint strip of green on the horizon. He used the last of his strength to paddle, pushing his tiny boat toward the unknown shore. As he got closer, he saw palm trees, rocky cliffs, and a small island that wasn't supposed to be there. He had no idea where he was, but he didn't care. He had finally escaped the endless ocean. Stumbling onto the beach, he collapsed, his body barely functioning after over 14 months adrift. He was so weak, he could barely lift his head. That's when he saw them, two islanders walking along the shore. They froze when they spotted him. A skeletal man, sunburned beyond recognition, with wild hair and torn clothes, crawling onto the beach like a ghost. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely a whisper. He had survived the impossible, but now he needed help. The islanders ran to get help. Within hours, Alvarenga was taken in by locals who gave him food and water, barely able to believe his story. Soon, the news spread. A missing fisherman, lost for over a year, had just washed up on a tiny island in the Marshall Islands, 6,700 miles away from where he started. His nightmare was over, but his story was just beginning. News of Salvador Alvarenga's survival spread like wildfire. Experts were baffled. No one had ever survived this long lost at sea. Scientists, journalists, and survival specialists all wanted to know, how did he do it? When Alvarenga was flown back to Mexico, he was completely unrecognizable. His once strong body was now frail, his skin permanently damaged from the relentless sun and salt water. But the most haunting change wasn't physical. It was in his eyes. He had spent 14 months alone in the vast nothingness of the Pacific Ocean, and it showed. At first, his story was celebrated as one of the greatest survival tales in history. But then, doubt started creeping in. Some people refused to believe him. The skeptics had questions. How could anyone survive that long with almost no supplies? Why didn't he look more malnourished? And the biggest question of all, what really happened to his deckhand, Cordoba? The official story was that Cordoba had died from starvation and sickness, but some skeptics whispered darker theories. Could Alvarenga have done the unthinkable to survive? There was no evidence, but the rumors spread fast. But Alvarenga stood by his story. He described every moment in vivid detail, and his body showed clear signs of extreme survival conditions. Experts eventually concluded that his survival was miraculous, but not impossible. His deep-sea fishing experience, his ability to catch food, and sheer human will had kept him alive. Years later, he published a book about his experience, giving the world the full story in his own words. But even today, some still debate the details of his survival. One thing is certain, no one else in recorded history has survived this long lost at sea. Salvador Alvarenga's story is one of the most unbelievable survival cases in human history. Against all odds, he endured 438 days alone in the vast Pacific Ocean, battling starvation, dehydration, deadly storms, and the crushing weight of isolation. Some called it a miracle, others called it impossible, but the fact remains. He lived through something that should have killed him. But this story leaves us with one big question. How far can the human body and mind really go to survive? Would you have made it? Could you have lasted even a week in the middle of the ocean with no food, no water, and no hope? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you thought this was unbelievable, wait until you hear about Flight MH370's final moments. That story is even more mysterious than this one. Click here to watch it now. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos that prove what happens when logic fails.